Hi, guys, this is Dr. Zafar, and today I have something very special for you. I got an email from Nora, who is a person who has obstructive lung disease, and her lung disease is pretty advanced now. When I talked to her, I felt that there is a lot that she has learned about her lung disease over time and how to manage her breathlessness and how to manage her symptoms. And she has tried multiple devices, multiple techniques. She has learned from multiple people. I think you'll find her interview very valuable in learning some new breathing techniques and also having the right mindset to fight your chronic lung disease and live with hope. So here's the recording of our Zoom interview. Again, thank you so much for joining. Now, first, let's start off with how is the lung disease affecting your life?
It's had a huge impact on my life because it was progressing for years without me knowing it. And I've been educated by my doctors to understand that as people become more and more short of breath, we unconsciously adapt. So we might walk a little more slowly, do other things. So we don't notice that our lungs are becoming less able to breathe. So for me, my experience then was that, within a few weeks, it seemed like I went from breathing perfectly fine to struggling to breathe during normal activities. It was very scary. And I went in the hospital for a few days. They tried to figure out what was going on. And I left the hospital on supplemental oxygen 24/7. So it was incredibly shocking to me. I was working as a high school teacher at the time. I continued working for about 3 months. And then once I realized that I had an incurable progressive lung disease, I just thought I need to focus just entirely on my health and my family and other aspects of my life. And so I retired early on disability.
It was probably developing for some time, but it caught up on you very quickly. Like it hit you a bit too fast.
Yes.
The condition you have is it's not COPD, but it's still something that leads to tight air tubes, makes the breathing flow difficult, right?
Yes. Yes. My understanding is that the air gets trapped. And so I have trouble exhaling. And then if there's air that's stuck in there, then new air carrying oxygen can't get in.
Right.
You end up with just this blockage and
Yeah.
shortness of breath.
This condition, bronchiolitis obliterans or BO, it's different in terms of what causes it, but the
Mhm.
mechanism of you getting out of breath is very similar to what people would have with COPD. Which symptoms do you think were the most challenging?
I've been amazed to discover how much oxygen is needed to do just simple everyday things. Some of the first things I noticed was that I was becoming exhausted just by putting on my clothes in the morning. Like I would be getting dressed for work and I would need to sit down and rest in the middle of it. Exhausting to take a shower. I mean, at this point in my disease, I'm not responsible to do any chores at our house. My husband does much of it, and we've hired someone to help because I can't be counted on. It might be a moment where I have some energy. My disease is quite advanced. Oxygen is really important for fueling your muscles, helping you move.
It's so important for these chronic lung conditions to really understand your limitations,
Yes.
right?
Well, it's funny because I'd say yes. And one of the most important things about my disease is getting exercise every single day.
Right.
Because although I cannot do anything to stop the progression of change inside of my lungs, I can make a difference in terms of how difficult or easy it is for me to breathe by maintaining muscle strength
Hmm.
for not just my diaphragm muscle, but also all of these other torso muscles that I've learned
Yeah,
jump in to help for someone like myself with a lung disease.
absolutely. I need to understand my limitations, but at the same time, I need to develop my capacity. And within the bounds of my lung disease, maximize your kind of ability to do work, to do exercise, and be functional. So, what techniques and tools have you tried out, use, and how do you use them?
Well, I guess, I mean, they're kind of two different pieces of this,
Hmm.
or how I kind of divide in my mind. There's my lung care piece,
Hmm.
and then there's my exercise piece. And so for my lung care, there are a lot of different tools that I use. Traditionally, or most commonly, the disease that I have causes buildup of mucus in the lungs. I actually don't have a lot of mucus buildup. However, I did have a very serious bacterial infection last fall. I'm at higher risk of having those because of my disease. And if I have those bacterial infections, it can cause more permanent harm to the lungs. So I have a number of devices to try to help me get mucus out. I mean, number one, it's not a device, but just drinking water. I drink a lot of water to keep the mucus as fluid as possible. And I have two different devices that I got from two different hospitals, an aerobica and an acapella. And each of these are little devices you breathe into, and they help to physically vibrate the lungs inside to help break up some of the mucus, help you get it out. Also, with my toolkit, I use something called a big breathe, which is a little device that was given to me by a pulmonary physical therapist. And this is a device that you inhale into, and it has resistance that you can adjust, and it's meant to help to exercise your diaphragm and other muscles involved in inhalation. So I've been using that, and that's kind of satisfying because over the months of using it, I have progressed a little bit in the amount of resistance I can tolerate. And there's one other device I haven't mentioned. I actually wear it around my neck every day because it's got this handy string. It's called a PEP Buddy. And I learned about this from a member of a community group I'm a part of, an online group for people with lung disease. And what this is a device that I exhale into, and it helps to slow my breath when I exhale, that somehow then inside the lungs helps to change the pressure so that my lungs are better able to get rid of some of the carbon dioxide gas that otherwise can get trapped inside. And I use it regularly. The first one I got, I didn't wear around my neck, and I kept it in my pocket, and it fell out of my pocket and I lost it.
Hmm.
So I realized there was a reason why it had this little loop on it, which is stretchy, which is nice. Because throughout the day I might use this. I mean, even in this conversation, there have been a number of times where I thought, oh, I could probably benefit by doing this. Getting a little breath shortness. But I might walk down the hallway and then feel short of breath and use this for half a minute and then just feel more stable in terms of my breathing.
And we call it PEP Buddy for this reason. That's a buddy that, it stays on with you because it's designed for your moment to moment breath regulation and helping you breathe better. I'm glad that you now have this around your neck most of the day.
And then the last tool that I'm kind of looking around to remind myself, and the last tool I can see is the spirometer. And the spirometer was given to me when I was in hospital. And when you're lying down, a doctor explained to me, every night when you go to sleep, parts of your lungs actually collapse just from you lying on them. When you're in the hospital and you're in bed so much, there's the risk that just your lungs become compressed, and it puts you at greater risk of problems of infection and so forth. And by breathing, it is again a device you inhale into, and by doing it, you're helping your lungs to kind of stretch out and inflate. And although it's not diagnostic, I use it every single day. And it does help me kind of monitor well, what's my lung potential? What's particularly hard about lung disease is that, air pressure and humidity every single day can affect how well the lungs work. And so you have to kind of like weather versus seasons. You have to not get too preoccupied by how you're feeling in this particular moment or on this particular day. Because overall, over a whole week or over a whole month, you might be having a really good month, even if you have a really bad day.
You're someone that I've seen use all the devices out there. With these devices, which ones do you use almost like daily, and which ones do you use kind of as needed?
Well, I use the PEP Buddy daily, sort of
Mhm.
as whenever I can benefit. And I don't think I mentioned that I also nebulize. I
You did
forgot
not
that.
mention nebulizers yet, yeah.
Yeah, I also have a nebulizer.
Hmm.
I just nebulize salt water, meaning that I breathe
Hmm.
in the salt water and it helps to loosen the mucus in my lungs. So I nebulize, I use the percussive vest, I use the big breathe and the spirometer.
In the day-to-day challenges of people with COPD or lung diseases, it seems like, you're looking for something to help you in many ways. How eager are you to kind of get your hands on it?
I am very eager to try things. Well, some were, provided by an experience at the hospital or through a physical therapist. I find my time with my doctors is relatively limited. I belong to two different virtual communities
Mm.
of breathers, people with lung diseases, and I hear about new things there all the time. And that's so valuable because people have used them. I mean,
Mm.
somebody who had used the PEP Buddy recommended it.
Mm.
I'm much more likely to investigate something if someone I know, even if it's through an online community, has tried it out already. Managing the disease is so difficult. Not just me, but other members of the groups are also always seeking new ideas.
You had mentioned that there are also devices, I guess, equipment you use for exercise. Tell us that experience as well, or which ones are those?
I had been a pretty active person. I rode a bike, I swam, I liked walking. When I first had to go into oxygen, I went through an experience that I understand now a lot of people have when they develop severe lung disease, which is that I lost like 20 pounds and it felt like every muscle in my body had disappeared. I was so weak and I could barely exercise. My husband and I already belonged to a gym, and he would pack me in the car with my oxygen and bring me there, and I would pedal so slowly on the bike. And then we did manage to fix up a bike on a trainer at our house. So an outdoor bike, but it sits on a training wheel. So I use that. I use a treadmill at the gym. Using a rollator is helpful because to walk, I can actually walk better if I'm using a rollator, which is a walker with wheels,
Hmm.
because it creates something called a closed chain where my arms are supported, which
Hmm.
frees up these torso muscles, the accessory breathing muscles. So they're focused on breathing, not trying to manage my arms. That's my civilian interpretation. Might be somewhat wrong physiologically.
That's actually pretty good. That's the same reason when you see athletes or sprinters, when they are done with the race, and now to catch the breath, they would kind of bend down and put hands on the knees
Yes.
because that's exactly what they're doing, that they're giving more muscles for the respiratory system and not the arms and resting the arm. With the PEP Buddy, I have a question for you that when we designed it, of course, it was designed for your day-to-day activities. Now, some people have found it useful before activities that they get in the right rhythm to breathe before they even start walking. Some are using it during activities, and many are using it after activities to kind of just quickly get back in shape. And the fourth time people are using it is when they're just feeling a bit anxious to calm themselves down and get the kind of almost like a meditation effect, the yoga effect of this breath regulation. How are you using it?
Yeah. I sometimes use it when I'm walking
Hmm.
for a little bit, not the whole time. The one time I almost always use it is going from our front door to the car and then in the car for a bit. Because there's a lot to, well, getting my oxygen tank, I have a little rolling cart for it, sitting on a chair to put my shoes on, getting the oxygen tank, stepping outside, different environmental condition, walking about 40 feet to the car, lifting my oxygen tank into the car, getting into the car, all of that. There are so many changes that happen that by the time I get in the car, I'm just huffing and puffing. And my husband is always, if I don't use this right away, he says, "Where's your PEP buddy?" So it really helps me to restore the balance.
Are there any suggestions about what are the challenges of using it?
Well, one challenge is that I don't use it the whole time I'm walking, partly because I will start to drool a bit. And so that's just, I'll have to take it out of my mouth and then
Right.
swallow. I can't think of any other drawback. I mean, besides, not everyone's walking around with a little thing in their mouth, so you have to get used to that. But as someone with lung disease, I think the best thing you can do right away is to stop thinking about what other people are thinking. Because you also might have a plastic tube in your nose. You might be using a rollator. Your chances are you're going to look a little different than everybody else out there.
Right. You gotta let go of how people are looking at you or perceiving you and just care about yourself.
Yes. And your health, you're thinking about your health. It's so important and so vital.
This shared learning, I think, is more powerful than anything that we physicians do. And I think you also benefited from shared learning in the Better Breathers Club. What are your top recommendations for someone who is on this journey right now?
I found it so useful when I joined the breathers community and then also found a second one. Those have been incredibly helpful to me. So that would be a top suggestion. It's incredibly difficult to hear a doctor tell you that you have an incurable disease that's progressive. Besides the lung disease, I have what has been called an incurable cancer. And yet I've been living with it for 9 years. And it hasn't been active for 4 years since I had that radiation treatment. So I think maintaining the hope that you don't know what's going to happen, and you might as well do your best to stay as healthy as possible, as long as possible. You can choose to live as good a life as you can with what you have. You can't change the insides of your lungs, but you can affect all of the muscles and the other body systems supporting those lungs. We have today, really, and choose what we do today.
Nora, thank you so much.